You're under 3 blankets, the thermostat is set, your phone is charging on the nightstand, and somehow you're still cold enough to curl into a ball at 2 in the morning. Now picture this. It's roughly 15,000 years ago, near the Dnieper River in what is now Ukraine. You're lying inside a hut built from the bones of woolly mammoths, stacked and lashed like some grim, brilliant piece of furniture. Outside, the wind is doing something your body has no vocabulary for, and the fire, the one thing standing between you and hypothermia, is dying. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Fire did not save ancient humans every single night. Not reliably, not for the whole winter. For most of human history, staying alive through the cold depended on a lot more than a flame, and the honest story is stranger, and frankly more impressive, than they built a fire and slept soundly. Let's start with the fire itself, because it's not the hero you think it is. Keeping a fire burning all night takes fuel, and fuel runs out. On the open, treeless steppe of the last ice age, wood wasn't exactly lying around. So people at sites like Mezhirich, excavated by Ukrainian archaeologist Ivan Podoplitchko in the 1960s and 70s, built entire shelters out of mammoth bones instead, skulls, tusks, and leg bones stacked into a windbreak, sometimes covered in hides. The bones weren't fuel, they were architecture. The real strategy wasn't burn more wood, it was block more wind. And even earlier than that, fire wasn't a guarantee at all. Archaeologist Dennis Sandgate's research on Neanderthal sites, including Dediria Cave, suggests fire use was inconsistent, present in some layers, strangely absent in others, even during cold periods. Which means an entire species of intelligent, tool-using hominins sometimes went through winter nights without a hearth at all. Not because they were incapable, because building a fire that lasts 8 hours, every night, for months, in freezing temperatures, is genuinely hard. It still is. Try it in your backyard sometime. So if fire wasn't the whole answer, what was? Bodies, plural. Here's where it gets interesting. One of the oldest, cheapest, most effective heating technologies humans ever used wasn't a technology at all. It was each other. Ethnographic work on hunter-gatherer groups, including sleep pattern research led by anthropologist Kim Hill, documents communal sleeping arrangements where multiple people, sometimes whole families, sometimes larger groups, slept pressed together under shared coverings. A human body radiates heat like a small, uncomplicated furnace. Put 5 of them in a tight space under hide blankets, and you've built a heating system with no moving parts and zero risk of running out of firewood. There's a modern comedy version of this. You've probably fought a partner or a dog for blanket real estate at 3 a.m. Ancient humans had the opposite problem. More bodies in the sleeping pile meant more warmth for everyone, so closeness wasn't just emotional, it was thermal engineering. The fact that we still associate cold nights with wanting someone next to us isn't a coincidence, it's an inherited habit older than agriculture. This is where the channel's honest take comes in. Fire gets all the credit in the popular imagination, but huddling and shelter design were doing more of the actual life-saving work, night after night, for far longer than fire was reliably available at all. But bodies alone don't explain everything. There's a biological piece too. Physical anthropologist John Steegman's work on cold-adapted populations found real physiological differences in circumpolar groups, patterns in body shape, fat distribution, and blood flow to the extremities that reduce heat loss. Stockier builds, shorter limbs relative to torso size, more effective vasoconstriction in fingers and toes. This isn't ancient humans being tougher through sheer willpower. It's evolution quietly optimizing the hardware over many generations, the same way a body adapts to altitude or to a high-starch diet. Cold wasn't just survived. Over time, it was built into people, and the fat itself mattered in a very direct way. A body running low on stored fat loses heat faster and has less fuel to shiver with, which is one reason winter nutrition, dried meat, marrow, stored fat reserves from a successful hunt, wasn't just about calories. It was about not freezing to death in your sleep. Eating enough in October was, in a very literal sense, a January survival strategy. Now let's talk about the night itself, because this is the part almost nobody mentions. You've probably heard that people used to sleep 8 straight hours before electric light ruined everything. That's not quite right. Historian Roger Eckhurch's research into sleep before artificial lighting describes something called segmented sleep, a first sleep and a second sleep, with a waking period in between, sometimes an hour or more, in the middle of the night. During that waking window, people didn't scroll a phone. They tended the fire, they checked on children, they listened. Stay with me, because this reframes the whole picture. That midnight fire tending wasn't an inconvenience layered on top of sleep. It may have been the reason sleep worked at all in the cold. A fire needs feeding roughly every few hours or it dies, so a body clock that naturally surfaces someone from sleep in the dead of night isn't a flaw, it's maintenance. Ancient nights weren't passive, they were managed, in shifts, by people whose biology was built to wake up and check on the flame before it was too late. So let's reconstruct a normal night, somewhere cold, deep in the past. You lie down early, wrapped in hide, pressed shoulder to shoulder with 2 or 3 others for warmth. The fire is low but alive. A few hours in, you wake. Not from noise, not from worry, just because your body's rhythm nudges you awake. You add fuel, you listen to the wind outside the mammoth-bone wall, or the cave entrance, or the hide tent flap. You check that the breathing next to you is steady, then you lie back down for a second sleep. This happens more than once a night, all winter, for years. It's not glamorous, it's not what movies show. It's quiet, repetitive vigilance, and it worked. Here's the twist that flips the whole fire saved them story. The real technology of ancient winter survival wasn't any single tool. It was redundancy. Shelter blocked the wind when fire was low. Bodies provided heat when shelter wasn't enough. Fat reserves bought time when food was scarce, and a sleep rhythm built for waking meant nobody had to stay up all night alone, dreading the fire going out. Take away any one piece, and the others still held the line. That's not luck. That's layered design, built by trial and very cold error over tens of thousands of years. And there's a heavier side to this worth sitting with. A person 15,000 years ago, half awake at some unmarked hour, feeding a dying fire by feel in the dark, and a person tonight, half awake at 3 a.m., checking a phone battery percentage before rolling back over. Almost nothing else about those 2 moments is the same. The world, the danger, the stakes, all completely different. But that particular flavor of groggy, low-grade vigilance in the middle of the night, that's the same nervous system doing the same job it's always done, just aimed at something much less likely to kill you. The honest answer is, we don't know exactly how any single family or group weathered any single brutal night that far back. The archaeology gives us bones and hearths and shelter outlines, not diaries. But what we do know, from sites like Mezhirich, from the patchy fire record at places like Dediria, from cold-adapted bodies, and from the sleeping habits Eckhart traced right up until the modern era, is that winter survival was never about one clever trick. It was about never depending on just one thing, which maybe explains something about you, the instinct to burrow deeper under blankets when it's cold, the strange comfort of sleeping next to someone else on a freezing night. Even waking up at an odd hour for no clear reason and lying there in the dark listening, none of that is random. It's a rhythm your ancestors needed to survive, quietly running in a body that, most nights now, doesn't need it anymore. So here's a question worth sitting with. If your ancestors survived the coldest nights in history without dependable fire, using nothing but shelter, closeness, and a body built to keep watch, what do you think you've lost, now that none of that vigilance is required anymore? If this reframed how you think about a cold night, let me know in the comments what part surprised you most. I'll see you in the next one.